Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining with us today. And my name is Prami. I'm working on the development team here at the Stop Community Food Center, and I work closely with our donor community, including many of you here today. And it's really great to be able to connect this way. So today's session is a little bit different than a typical presentation. We've reached out to our community and asked what's really on your mind and what you want to understand about what's going on here at the stop. What are the challenges we're facing? What impacts we're creating in the community? And so we're covering this in the questions directly by you. And we'll walk through these set of questions that were submitted in advance. And please feel free to also share it in the chat if you have any other questions that come along as we go. And if we have time, we'll, of course, address them at the end. And I'm pleased here today for our executive director, Shae London, who is joining us to discuss these topics and to go through with them. So Shae brings a deep understanding of both the day-to-day of what goes on in the stop and at the stop and what's happening on the groundwork, as well as like the broader systems on which we're navigating through. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And before we jump in, I also want to thank our Good Food Circle members, our monthly donors. You are a community of over 820 people who make this work possible. So this kind of consistency allows us to plan ahead and support our community, and we thank you for that. And with that being said, let's get into the questions we've received. Shae, we heard that from our donors around the biggest challenges around the stop. So from your perspective as the executive director, what is the single most glaring challenge of our organization? And what steps are we taking to overcome this?
Well, good evening, and thank you for the question, Promi, and to our Good Food Circle community. Um, well, oftentimes the board asks me, what keeps me up at night? And I would say this is one of those things. So when we're asking questions about what the most pressing challenge is, and as an organizational response, from my perspective, the most significant challenge we face right now is the growing gap between the rising community need and the resources available to meet that need. We are seeing sustained and intensifying pressure on individuals and households, particularly around food security and affordability. That shows up in our programs, not just as increased volume, but as more complex and urgent needs. At the same time, we're operating in a much higher cost environment. The cost of food supplies and essential services has increased significantly, driven by broader economic volatility and supply chain issues and pressures. So, of course, it is costing us more to deliver the same level of service and to do so with dignity and quality. I think to illustrate that, I've shared an infographic. Hopefully, we can put that up here. And yeah. Is it up? So this graphic highlights the busiest day on record at our food bank. This was November 14th, 2025. And on this day, 177 households presented at our food bank. This includes 417 individuals, 113 children, 53 seniors, and of the households that presented, 61% of them, or 61 of them included individuals between 3 and 10 within their households. So this is not an outlier. It's an increasingly reflective of what we're seeing on the ground. So in answer to the question, the dual pressure, rising demand and rising costs, is the single biggest factor putting a strain on our mission. However, in response to this, we are taking a multi-pronged approach. And I would say first, it's about strengthening and diversifying our fundraising efforts. Of course, broadening our donor base across all levels of donor stewardship. This is something we've been focused on. It's part of our strategy. So this is definitely, I think, step number one. Secondly, it's about deepening partnerships to extend our reach and impact. At the stop, we know that we can't do it all, and we don't pretend to be able to, but there are other partners who are providing other services that we consider wraparound services to support the individual in their time of need. And I think thirdly, it's about adapting our programs in real time, expanding capacity where possible, including in our food bank and our drop-in, but across all of our programs. So ultimately, our focus is on staying responsive while protecting the integrity and the dignity of the services that we provide. Additional investment at this moment is critical, not just to sustain our work, but to ensure that we can continue to meet those growing needs, I would say, like in a meaningful way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Shay. And I think that's really helpful with the infographic that you showed. And like it's the reality of what we're seeing right now. And naturally, when we talk about challenges, the next question becomes how is all of this sustained? What really connects to the next question is how is the stop funded? And what role does the community donations play in comparison to the government funding?
This is such an important question, and I'm glad someone from our community asked this question because it's really important for our community to know how important a role that they play in the sustainability of our organization. And luckily, I think, majority, if not all of our community of supporters really do get the mission of the stop and really want to be a part of it for all of the right reasons. The stop operates as an approximately $5.3 million operating budget organizationally across the year each year. And of that 5.3 million, only about 13% of our funding comes from government sources, which means that the other 87% is community driven. We truly are a grassroots organization that is largely funded by our community. So that includes individual donors, our monthly supporters, corporate partners, and foundations. But what's important about that mix is flexibility. So because the majority of our funding comes from the community, we are able to respond more quickly and directly to emerging needs. Of course, our monthly donors, our Good Food Circle friends here are especially critical. With monthly funding, they provide stable, predictable funding that we can rely on every single month. And at current, we have about 820 or so monthly donors. And I often say the Good Food Circle isn't just about giving, it is a community of people who make this work possible every single month. So let this not be the first or the last time I say thank you to all who are joining us here tonight.
Thank you so much, Shay. And yeah, that's really powerful of like the Good Food Circle community. Like the individual giving turns into something bigger, right? And
Absolutely.
another theme that came up and most probably common is impact. People really want to understand what their support actually does and the impact that it holds. So, one question that we have is how does donor funding translate into real impact?
Um, as a roughly $5.3 million organization, again, the organization, so the vast majority of our funding goes directly into programs addressing food insecurity. So that includes over $800,000 in food procurement and distribution. We actually purchased the food, much of it, that we also supply to our community, and we do so using ethical and as much local as is possible. Also, supporting the local food economy in that way. More than $1.8 million goes into direct program staffing and delivery. So we are people powered as an organization. So that's part of where that money goes. And again, nearly $840,000 goes into supporting community programming across all three physical locations, as well as our broader community partnerships and programs. So at the same time, we are navigating rising food costs and increasing demands. I mentioned that already. So when someone donates, it translates very directly into meals, food hampers, and access to fresh, healthy food. And just as importantly, it supports spaces where people feel welcomed, supported, and connected to community. And we can talk about the numbers, I think, in upcoming questions, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, putting numbers really does put into context of making it more tangible. But we also heard that people don't just want numbers, people want to understand the human side of the work. So, how do we define and measure the impact beyond the numbers?
Um, well, let me preface this by providing some numbers, and then we'll get into like beyond the numbers, because I think
Yeah.
it's important for people to actually understand the numbers as well.
Yeah.
Um, so, so we're talking about qualitative and quantitative data here. So let's first talk about the quantitative. This is what the real hard, sort of tangible numbers that people um, can wrap their kind of thoughts around and understand that as a concept, more less conceptual and more like concrete. So quantitatively, we track meals served and hampers distributed. This is what we refer to as our emergency food services programming. Program participation. So how many people are we impacting on a daily basis, an annual basis? And of course, food grown and distributed. So when we think about food security, it's not just about handing out or people receiving food. It's ensuring that people have access to land to grow food, and we measure that food grown in kilograms and capture that as a larger, broader sort of impact of the organization. So let's talk meals. Over 80,000 meals are served through our drop-in programs each year, and we have two drop-in locations. And oftentimes when I'm telling this story, I like to put just to give more context to that number. Scotiabank Arena serves 20 seats 20,000 people. So if you have you ever been at a Raptors game, you're in a crowd of 20,000 and you take that number and you multiply that by four. That's how many meals we serve each year through our drop-in program. So it's not
Wow.
a significant number.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our Healthy Beginnings program supports more than 100 expectant and new mothers annually. And these are individuals who are often facing complex challenges, such as recent arrivals, some language barriers, mental health barriers, isolation, single motherhood, low income, generally speaking. So this is all about giving expectant parents a healthy start to a new family beginning. Our urban agriculture program grew over 4,000 seedlings last year and supported more than 60 community gardens beyond our own. So when we think about people having access to food and fresh food, we're not just providing here, but we are providing across the city of Toronto. And ideally, someday I'd like to do a heat map to see how far our breadth and reach is through our urban
Yeah.
agriculture programming, because it's significant.
Yeah.
In those gardens, our own gardens, we grew nearly 600 kilograms, grown across like three community gardens this last year. Again, that's
Oh,
a
wow.
significant amount of food. And most of that food grown goes back to the participants who are helping to steward those gardens. And what's left comes back into either our direct meal programs or our food bank. Our tax clinic, which is an offshoot of our advocacy program, returned almost $300,000 to our community last year. This is direct purchasing power. It's putting money back into the hands of individuals so that they have their own autonomy to do with what they want with the money that they is rightfully theirs. Again, uh, it's a volunteer driven tax clinic. People come, they have their tax returns processed through our office. And of those individuals, $300,000 of tax returns and benefits back to community. I'm so proud of our team in that
Wow.
regard. And of course, as I keep saying, we are people powered. And with that, about 180 volunteers supported our work last year. Couldn't do it without them. So these
Yeah.
are metrics, and the metrics matter.
Yeah.
They matter because they help us understand scale and our demand, but more importantly, they give us data to monitor trends, anticipate shifts, and adapt our programs proactively rather than reactively. So, again, the question was about beyond the numbers. Okay.
Yes.
So, equally important is the qualitative data. So, this is where I'll ask you to maybe show the other photo that we have ready to go. And qualitative, when we speak about qualitative data, we're talking about the lived experiences of people we serve. Dignity, connection, belonging, and reduced isolation. So food is often the gateway. It's how people first connect with the stop. But once they're here, and experience the space as welcoming and dignified, they begin to engage more deeply. Once they begin to establish a trusting relationship with us as an organization and our staff. And from there, we connect them to other programs, supports, and external services through referrals. And in that way, food becomes an entry point into the broader community of support. This photo that we're sharing here, it reflects a snow day in January. And if everybody was here throughout the winter, we all know we had at least two of those. And this one day in particular, much of the city shut down. Schools closed, transit reduced, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was chaos. And yet, our staff showed up, our volunteers showed up, and without a doubt, our community showed up. One individual on his way in had fallen in the snow, and of course, our staff, rushed to their support. And he came in saying he was just there for breakfast and lunch. It didn't matter what the weather was, he was going to be there, and we were there to receive him. Another individual, these are stories that were relayed back to us, took Wheel-Trans from Scarborough. Even the driver of that Wheel-Trans vehicle wasn't even sure that the destination would be open, but the individual insisted that the stop would be there, and we were. And another individual arrived late on this day, distressed, saying that she didn't know where else to go. She had come for the food bank. And of course, our staff, once again, received her, prepared an emergency for hamper for her, and sent her on her way. Like, this is real. In some aspects, people are at critical points. If you're leaving and traversing through these kinds of conditions, there is a need. There is an absolute need. So this day underscored something critical for us, and that is that many of our services are not optional. They are, in fact, essential. And I'm sharing this photo because it was shared back with us as a staff team. It was someone, a neighbor, so you can see the perspective of this photograph here. It was a neighbor who had taken a photo um, showing that regardless of the conditions, the stop and the daily bread were there to serve community. And this photograph actually got circulated back to the Daily Bread. And we were told that it was doing its rounds around their organization, and then it eventually got back to us. So people notice the impact we have on our community, and it matters. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think this really brings into perspective that connection and the impact that we bring into our community. It's really important. And it's definitely harder to measure rather than the numbers, but it's just as important.
And
And another,
we have a
yeah,
ton of stories across all of our programs, uh, across the organization. We could, it's daily. It's daily. People are kind of relaying back to us how important it is that we are here and how meaningful it is uh, in their lives that they have an opportunity to engage with us, and that is on across all different levels, whether that's a community member receiving services, volunteers, even our donors who like to come and engage with the organization. They really understand what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I would even say, there's many a staff member who have also, gone through some of these programs and our services and are now embedded inside of the organization, giving back to community in that way just
yeah,
because of the impact that we've had.
yes, yes, for sure. Thank you so much, Shay.
Of course.
Um, Another theme which feels very relevant right now,
Yeah.
um, and I think it reflects a broader conversation, is trust in the sector. And I wanted to ask you, how does the stop ensure its transparency and accountability and how the funds are being used?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question as well, just because it means a lot. The integrity of our work is everything. Um, and we're checking ourselves and fact checking ourselves every single day. So trust is foundational to our work. And, when I say checking ourselves and cross and fact checking ourselves, it's just to ensure that mistakes aren't happening. And mistakes happen. We're human. But as long as we are mitigating any risk in that category, I am satisfied, but we're always checking. So to ensure transparency and accountability, I would say, there are a few things that we're doing very intentionally. So one is clearly communicating how funds are used, and we are respecting donor dollars intent, the donor intent, wherever possible. Um, the second thing we're doing is maintaining strong financial oversight. And we do this by including our annual independent audits with we've had annual independent audits with consistent, clean audit results. And those results can be found on our website very transparently. If anyone wants to go to our website, it's thestop.org, and you will see our financial data and our financial audits from the last 4, 5, 6 years up on our website for anyone to see. And the last and what I would consider one of the most important things that we are doing is upholding rigorous data protections and standards. Um, so we're always looking to ensure that any third-party vendors that we're doing have the most up-to-date security measures and protocols in place, but we also ensure that we are not buying or selling our donor data. And I think that is such an important one. We've all kind of signed up and tried to do good in the world by donating elsewhere, and all of a sudden you're getting a lot of mail that's comes from somewhere that you have no connection to. Rest assured, your name is not being sold through our lists. This is something that we very clear on. But we also offer flexibility in how donors engage, both in how they give and where their support is directed. Ultimately, our responsibility is to ensure that every dollar is used effectively, ethically, and in direct alignment with our mission. So, yeah. I don't know what else to say on that, except I feel very passionate about the topic. So I'm hoping that how I'm feeling is properly conveyed through what I'm saying. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, that's something that I would say that the stop does very well in, and how we're transparent with what we do with the funding that we receive. And that's something that people are really looking uh, really more into as well. And just to shift gears a little, um, we also had a question that gives more insight into your role. So,
Ah,
what does the executive director at the stop do day to day? And how does the executive director support the organization's mission and programs?
oh, wow. That's interesting. If I could I wish I knew on any given day what I would be walking into. So I would say that there's not a single day that can be anticipated or planned to the nth. But at a high level, my role is to ensure that the stop is delivering on its mission today while also building the conditions for long-term sustainability, right? The organization has been around for 43 years, I believe, this year. And so this organization preceded my time at the organization and will likely be here after I'm gone. It's my job to ensure that while I am here, we are in good condition to continue to provide services and programming that is essential for our community. That means holding a dual lens at all time. So what does the community need right now? And how do we ensure that we are positioned to meet that need, not just this year, but 5 years and 10 years from now? So I oversee the strategic direction of the organization in support with the support of our board of directors, working closely with our leadership team and the board to ensure alignment between our mission, our operations, and our resources. But I would say I'm also deeply connected to our programming, and I need to understand what's happening on the ground, where pressures are emerging, and where we need to adapt. So that includes making decisions about where to invest, where to scale, and sometimes where we might need to make difficult trade-offs. Partnerships and fundraising, I would say, are also a significant part of that role, given the majority of our funding is community driven. Maintaining strong relationships with donors, funders, and partners is critical to sustaining our work. So again, thank you all for joining us here. But beyond structure and oversight, a big part of my role is, I think, is acting as a bridge. So translating what we're hearing and seeing in the community into meaningful organizational response. And I think that means ensuring that we're not just reactive, but thoughtful and intentional in how we evolve. So ultimately, my responsibility is to steward this organization in a way that is accountable to the community that we serve, responsive to changing realities, and grounded in dignity, equity, and impact, which is kind of the thread that, the through line of everything that we do and talk about here, as you know, Promi, at the organization every single day. And I would say that, like, I didn't really have an opportunity to introduce myself, but like just being in this role is kind of a full circle moment for me. I started as a volunteer inside of this organization about 14 years ago. Time flies. And how that happened, and I had been taking courses in the university focused on food security, and I was looking to get closer to the work in a real and practical way. And so I started volunteering and wanted to be even deeper ingrained once I found out how like incredibly lovely the work that we were doing is. And so when a position opened in the drop-in, I spent about 2 years there and transitioned. I applied for the role, first of all, got the role, and then I spent a couple of years there, a couple more years in our food bank. And I eventually did leave reluctantly to return to a previous role. But a year after I'd left, the executive director at the time reached out and asked if I would consider joining the board of directors. And I did. I served on the board for 5 years before returning to the organization during a period of transition, stepping into this role now. So when I say full circle, it's coming back to lead an organization that has shaped so much of my professional and my personal journey has been absolutely incredible. I don't take a moment of this work for granted. The work of the stop has also helped me better understand my own lived experience. Growing up in an immigrant, single mother household, I see reflections of my own story in the community that we serve every day. So the impact of our work I hear the stories about the impact of our work that people share, and that's what drives me. To ensure that we continue to show up in a way that is consistent, that is dignified, and responsive to the needs of our community. So again, I really appreciate this opportunity. I really appreciate our community, and not sure what else I can say without drawing tears. So
Thank you so much, Shay. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And it really shows like the amount of layers that you are working on to make this work happen. And you really capture like the unique balance of the immediate support that the community does to like the long-term challenges that we're facing as well. So thank you for sharing everything. And yeah, this conversation was really to show how everything else is connected on what challenges we're seeing, on like the work we're doing, and how we're creating an impact in the community. So thank you so much, Shay, and thank you so much to everyone else that joined into today and the sharing your thoughtful questions as well. And at the end of the day, this work is only possible because of our community and because of the people that choose to show up and support in meaningful ways. So thank you for being part of that. And this is just one of our three-part series. We have a couple of more coming up, with one being on April 20th and the next one being on May 25th. So stay tuned for the registration for those, and we hope you have a good evening. Thank you so much.
thanks, everyone.